it was just so ridiculous. Like, just this gushing, like, who gushes? Who gushes? Hi everyone. Thank you again for joining me. Sorry for not posting last week. Work was a bit crazy, so I ended up having to take a small break to kind of get things all situated and then be able to join you with something that I actually read for Valentine's Day. So this is kind of like my Valentine's Day special video for you, and that's why I'm kind of like all dressed up and I have a pink skirt and everything. So, the book I wanted to talk to you all about that I read for Valentine's Day was a romance book called The Duke Goes Down by Sophie Jordan. Sophie Jordan is a pretty prolific romance novel writer. She has over 25 books published by Avon, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. So she has many, many books that she has published. She's also published under a pen name for paranormal books called Shirley Kohler. So she knows how to crank them out. So although I have a lot of criticisms for this book, I have to give her dues for the fact that, she actually writes a lot and writes and publishes pretty frequently. This book actually came out in 2021, and it's imprint at the beginning is in dedication of the Panini and all those who have gone through it. So she's also published one since then, since this book came out in the same series, which is The Duke Hunt. So if you like this book, you can definitely check out the next one. I didn't, so let me kind of just jump right into it, because why waste time? Now, the plot itself is pretty straightforward. It's about this girl named Imogen, who is the daughter of a vicar. Her mother died when she was a teenager before she was able to find her a husband, and so she's been taking care of her ailing father as he's gone through some medical problems. And in her history, the vicarage that her father watches over is on the property of this duke, the Duke Who Goes Down. His name is Peregrine or Perry, and he unfortunately loses his dukedom because it turns out that he's the bastard son of the dead duke. And I mean bastard lightly because he is the legitimate son. It's just that he was born prior to his parents being married. So they revoke the dukedom and the duke title from him. And so now he's the duke who has gone down. Not, sexually going down, just, in title. Now, these two, Imogen and Perry, do know each other. In the beginning of the book, you get a flashback where basically she's at some sort of party and she is trying to avoid a lot of people because she's feeling out of place, and she ends up hiding in a greenhouse where she hears him and a couple of his friends bad-mouthing her in particular, and how she's like a goody-goody and she doesn't know how to keep a conversation. So there's tensions right there that basically tell you that, yeah, these two are going to be like lovers or hate enemies to lovers or some sort of nonsense like that. But I say nonsense like that because they're not much of enemies. There's not much of a tension, because although when he loses his dukedom and he comes back to their village, Imogen is trying to ensure that he doesn't capture any of the eligible bachelorettes in her town who do have some money, who do have some title to them. It doesn't really seem to be anything that really would impede his ability to get a wife. For example, she mentions that he has, he's a really bad kisser. And everybody just accepts her opinion or her gossip as truth, which as the vicar's daughter I can sort of understand that, but at the same time it doesn't make any sense, because where would she have gotten this information? And does it really matter at that time where they would tend to marry for title and for, social mobility and for money, of course? So him being a good kisser doesn't really seem to factor into any of the three things that they would take into consideration when finding a good partner. And I found her other schemes or lies basically did not get him married are also on the same level of like ridiculousness, because it first, again, doesn't make sense that a vicar's daughter knows this kind of information about him, because she's living in this small town, so where would she have heard these rumors from unless she herself has this experience, which apparently never becomes an issue. Like, she's never like confronted by any of the village people about like how maybe may have kissed the Duke or had some kind of illicit affair with the Duke while she wasn't there and she had been with her mother in town. So I was like, oh, is this going to be a point of tension? And it wasn't. And that basically is the plot of the story, of how she's trying to hinder him from finding a bachelorette, and they kind of confront each other time and time again. And then finally she confesses that it's her. They kind of get together for a short period of time, and another drama thing happens. They split up and then they get back together. It's very fast paced in that there's a lot of like drama, one after the other. It's a bit predictable in that aspect, but it's also a bit confusing because, again, the things that you think would be important and would cause tension in their relationship, like, again, the fact that she knows so much about him being a good kisser, and maybe the village is going to look at her and is like, why does a vicar's daughter know this about this man, isn't a problem of tension in their relationship. And there's other problems, like his overall treatment of her before he decides that she's an attractive young woman that he wants to sleep with, doesn't come to be a problem either. Like, him and his sister have bullied her both physically and verbally. There's also like a connotation that because of what he said at the greenhouse at the beginning of the book, that kind of hindered her marriage prospects. So that's why she wasn't able to find someone to get married to. And that never becomes a tension or any kind of argument between the two of them where she's like, it's your fault I wasn't able to get married and blah, 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 blah. And overall, the big hiccup of him having lost his dukedom doesn't seem to be a problem also. Like, he's able to still navigate within high society, no problem. He's still able to like pursue these like wealthy heiresses with no problem, and it just doesn't seem to be an issue. Like, even the person that's supposed to replace him as the Duke never shows up during the whole novel, which I thought might happen, and he might be like another romantic interest for her, but that doesn't actually show up. And that's when I start to question why him having lost his Duke title was a thing, and like the legitimacy of it. I mean, of course it's a romance novel, so you're gonna have portions of it that aren't realistic, that are a bit fantastical, but I still try to find some like legitimacy and reality in it. Like, how quickly the relationship develops, of course, is going to be sped up, and of course is going to be sometimes unrealistic, but the tensions that are there should be in some capacity, and they just weren't. Like, why would the crown suddenly decide to remove this man's title just because he was born outside of wedlock? Oh, he was born outside of wedlock. It doesn't make any sense when they don't have anybody there replacing him immediately. It would make sense if there was a rival that contested his Duke title and wanted it as his own because he was a cousin or an uncle that was like, no, he's illegitimate, I want the title. But the reason why it gets contested to begin with was completely by accident. It's the main girl's fault, Imogen's fault. And that just felt like, again, another curveball to create tension that within pages was resolved. So it didn't even matter within the plot of the story whatsoever. The other issue I had with the book were the characters themselves. Like, maybe I'm just being petty, but starting from a petty standpoint, their names were very American, especially like Southern American. Her name is Imogen. Her best friend's name is Mercy. Some of the last names were a bit ridiculous. Like, Perry's friend his last name is Blankenship, which I don't understand because that makes it sound as if that person is a pirate or has pirate background, which wouldn't make any sense because they wouldn't allow anybody with that kind of background to hang out in high society. So I was kind of questioning these last names, and I understand that again, it's romance novel, it's fiction, but it's really not that hard to go even to a map of London or a map of England and just pick road names and use them as your character's last names. It's really easy to do this. So I don't understand why she was choosing these names that historically and just logistically don't make any sense. I feel as if it would have done better as an American, a Western book, if anything, if she wanted to keep it old-timey. Or she could have still kept him like an English duke who came to America, who's trying to find his fortune and go back to England, and he decides to stay. And now I'm just hypothesizing on potential plot lines, but it would make the names a lot more understandable, and it would make the relationships of certain characters a lot more understandable. For Imogen, her best friend is a farm owner or someone who runs a farm, which I believe wouldn't make any sense logistically at that time within the different societal tiers. Someone who works on a farm isn't going to hang out with a vicar's daughter just because, they don't run in the same circles. I understand if they own the farm, but again, that doesn't make any sense for the time as well. People individually didn't own farms. They were owned by, the land itself was owned by dukes or lords, and then they were worked on by other people, but those people were entitled or gentle individuals or genteel individuals. So that's where I also found that there were problems within the story, where the characters themselves and the idea of, oh yeah, these people would hang out with each other, which drew me out of the story, drew me out of the fiction and the fantasy of it all, which romance is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a fantasy story. And overall, the characters, though it is a very short book, it's almost 340, it's only 340 pages. The characters are tropey at times, which again is fine. It's a short book, but some of the background characters were unnecessarily tropey. In fact, there's this one character called Mr. Henry that's time and time again pointed out at different parts of the book for being disgusting. He's a large, fat man. He eats terribly. He's loud and obnoxious. And by the way, he beats his wife. And Imogen is completely against him for that. And yes, of course, beating your wife, domestic abuse is a big issue and shouldn't be just accepted by people and shouldn't be tolerated by any level of society. But the fact that she characterized this man as being so physically unappealing was a bit cartoonish in its characterization. He doesn't need to be a Disney villain for him to be bad. He can still be an attractive person and also abuse his wife, which is typically the case, or not typically, but is as equally the case as the person being unappealing and unattractive. So I found that just really off-putting as well, especially since she didn't only do it with Mr. Henry, who shows up again a couple of times in the book, and you're not really sure what's the point of his existence, and he has no point to his existence, honestly. And then another character called Mr. Edgar, who the same thing happens. She describes him as somebody she was attracted to when she was doing her season, but then when she sees him again, she's oh, he's so disgusting. He eats so poorly, has such bad manners, and it's just why are you doing this? You can still be a man who you were attracted to, and you can still look back and be now that you're no longer emotionally attached to this person, be oh yeah, they're not my type, without going into the Disney villain extremes. Now, overall, as I mentioned, the plot had a lot of holes in it. the characters weren't really used in an effective manner. They were brought in and they were brought out. There were many moments where there was tension, and then the tension dissolves into nothing, as if, there was no point to it. And I feel like that's the biggest disappointment of this romance novel, is that there is something here that she could have turned into a good book, but it seems like she was trying to write like 4 different books into one, or these were snippets of 4 different books that she was potentially going to write, and instead of writing them out individually, she just smashed them into this one book and then tried to write it through by changing the names of the characters into Imogen and Perry, and it was like, this is their love story. And it's a very messy love story. In addition, like, as it is a romance novel, there is a sex scene in it, and I was just not entertained by it, because I don't know how to say this without laughing, but sometimes the biology didn't make any sense. Imogen was gushing a lot, and I thought that meant like she had orgasmed. But no, she was just gushing. And that made me kind of confused, because as much as I know about female biology, we don't gush randomly when we're horny. So I was trying to understand why she chose to write this the way that she did. And I don't mean to laugh. I don't. But it was just so ridiculous that it was like 4 pages of him like pleasuring her, and she couldn't even write it properly, because it's not so often that fiction and media in general focuses on female pleasure. So it's like, when it does, like, and the book is already kind of mediocre, at least make the sex scene decent. Like, it would give it a nice like passing grade at that point, right? If she actually wrote it decently, and considering she's written over 20 books of romantic fiction, I don't understand why she couldn't, like, she hasn't improved her sex scene writing. And it was just so ridiculous, like, just this gushing, like, who gushes? who gushes? And, like, maybe I'm missing something educationally. So, like, if I should learn, or if there's something I should learn, like, please let me know. Like, I don't want to be criticizing her for something that maybe women actually do, and I'm the problem here. Which I doubt. But I'm open to educating myself. So, in the end, I can't really recommend this book. I do enjoy, like, romantic fiction. Not typically pure romantic fiction. But I thought for Valentine's Day it would be a fun little thing to do. I'm going to check out Bridgerton after this, because as we all know, the new season is coming out in March, and I want to read The Duke and I in preparation for that, to see how her writing compares to the show. So I'll probably post a video about the book before the show comes out, hopefully. But what I really wanted to leave you with when it comes to this book is that when you're reading a romance novel, you don't have to, like, settle for crappy writing. There's a lot of good fiction out there that doesn't necessarily come from a published source, like HarperCollins, like Avon, The Imprint, or Harlequin for that matter. Sometimes it's just fan fiction, or it's just like self-published stuff, and it can be pretty decent. For Valentine's Day, some friends and I decided to watch 50 Shades of Grey, because I had never seen it until recently, till this year, honestly. And it just made me realize that if you just look to published books to consume certain type of fiction, like genre, you're going to limit yourself. And there is a lot of good fiction out there that isn't published. that is like just fan fiction or self-published. So you should go out and look for it. I've definitely read better fan fiction than this, like better historical fan fiction than this, and I've read better sex scenes than this that have been, written by a bunch of ladies on Archive of Our Own, and they've put that out there for free for you to read if you want. So don't limit yourself. Definitely don't think that you have to be stuck with a book whose lesson is it's okay if you end up with your bully as long as your bully is good looking. You know what I mean? That's the case for this book. It's just he's a bully. He's a terrible person. He doesn't seem to redeem himself in any way, shape, or form throughout the book, except to have sex with her, and that seems to change her mind because he gave her her first orgasm, which congratulations, girl, but you can do that to yourself. Whoops. You can do that to yourself. You don't need to wait for a shitty man to give you an orgasm and to be like, okay, that's it. I guess he's not a shitty man anymore. No, he's still a shitty person. He doesn't even have a job. He doesn't have money. He doesn't even have a title. Don't settle. You don't have to settle, especially when you can do it for yourself. So yeah, all to say, I could only give this a 1 star. Sorry, Sophie Jordan. And to all of you, I hope you had an amazing Valentine's Day. You enjoyed chocolate, whether you were celebrating with somebody or with yourself. And if you are looking to find something steamy to read, try to find something a little bit from a source that isn't a conventional place. Yeah, hopefully that made sense. But if not, let me know. And if anything, I'd love to hear your opinions or your recommendations of any romance novels that you've read and you found were really good. And I hope you have a wonderful day wherever you are. The sun is still out for us, so I'm enjoying the vitamin D while I can. And I'll see you all next time. Take care, everyone.